Welcome, artistic friends, to Monet Cafe. In this particular video, I'm going to be talking about keeping it fresh. And often we can do that when we're working on more inexpensive materials and we're just kind of relaxed and not so stressed about creating a masterpiece. And pardon my voice being raspy, I just returned from my son's wedding and did a lot of talking. In this particular video, I'm going to be doing a watercolor underpainting and applying pastel on top. I'm once again using some Arteza products. They're kind enough to send me some of these products to review and kind enough to give you a 10% off coupon code if you use the coupon code Susan Jenkins 2 prior to June 25th. Also, if you do order, please go to the description section of this video to click on the links to lead you to Arteza. It does help me out a little bit, so I appreciate that. Now let's get to the lesson, but first I'd like to say I'm dedicating this particular video to my son Bryson and his beautiful bride Lorena that he met on a mission trip in Romania. For this painting, I'm using a reference photo that's a favorite of mine. It's a picture of a field on my parents' property in Live Oak, Florida. If you find a picture that you like, you can use it over and over again to paint from. I'm just doing a quick little study for composition now with an index card. It's a nice little shape. If you want just little pieces of paper to work on to create an initial sketch or value study, index cards are great. Now I am basically just going to be using some charcoal pencils. You can use whatever you have. You can use regular pencil, but what we're doing is a quick composition study with some value to it. Value meaning lightness or darkness. Some people like to use a marker or markers that are light, middle, and dark values. So really the main thing is to just work out any issues compositionally and just kind of look at the layout and the design of how you want your painting. I find that doing an initial study like this often helps me to create energy, movement, and drama rather than just starting with no initial plan. So I sped this up just because you can get the general idea. Now, here I am using Arteza products again. They keep sending me products to review, and they're actually really great. So this is a 32 pages, watercolor pages in this particular pack. It is the Expert pack, and it is, you'll see up top, I'll read it in case you can't see it, cold pressed, dual-sided, glue bound, and this is really great paper. Just so you know, this particular one comes in a 2-pack. I'm not sure why, but it's great. I got 2 of them. And I'm going to show you this paper because I really do like it. It works well for the purposes when I use it with the clear gesso to apply to make a pastel painting. It's really nice and smooth, which some watercolor paper is not quite this smooth. Now, this little set I loved. It's a 36 watercolor set in the half pans. They're these little half pans. The other Arteza product I used was the tubes. It was the wet paint. These are already dried, and it comes in a nice little case. I did like, really the colors in this are really beautiful. They have a nice color selection and the colors behave beautifully. I love the little tray here where you can mix your colors. They have the nice little reference guide in case you need to order more. You can refer to that. And also these half pans are removable, so you can add to it, switch them around if you want. Also, it comes with this water brush, it's called. Now these things are neat for travel. I'm not going to use it in this video, but what's neat is if you're on the go and you don't have any water with you, it holds water in the back end of the brush. You just fill water into that part. And the front end is the brush. Now that's a neat, that black thing inside of there. It's like a water control valve. It's really neat. And if you want one, you can actually get them separately in their 4-pack here. So these are pretty cool, a water brush. Now, this is my little hinge system. I really just put a piece of art tape on the back of this watercolor paper with a little sticking up, and then a piece on the front to adhere it. It makes like a little hinge. And now here are the beautiful watercolors. I really did love these. And by the way, you can get these if you go to arteza.com, but I'll have a link in this website. They do give me a little kickback if you order it from my About section or the description of this video. And I think I'll also give you a coupon code, hopefully if I can get it in time, to give you 10% off. So if you want to order them, it's best if you order them through this video in the About section. Now, these are just my brushes that I use. I keep a lot of them that I like, my favorite ones, in a little case. And have some paper towels on hand. I use that just to control the amount of water in the brush so it's not like too wet or too dry. Now that's a little teeny piece of a new pastel, NU pastel, made by Prismacolor. They're harder pastels. Oh, You got, oh, I was gonna say you gotta have your coffee, but look at my cut. I got a paper cut. Monet Cafe coffee cup. I love my cup. It's awesome. If you want one, I do have a link to it. Now we're gonna get started with this. And I do have my little aluminum foil trough down there, but basically all I'm doing is making a quick little sketch with this Prismacolor NuPastel, kind of getting in that same basic value sketch like I did in the drawing. So I sped this up because, you know, you can kind of get the idea. I'm getting the different levels. I like to create depth in my painting, and I also like to create like a road, a path, a trail, or something to lead the eye into the painting. Even if it gets covered up a lot, you still keep that basic dark value underneath and it leads the eye in. Now I'm just using regular water. You can use alcohol if you want, just regular alcohol. I'm not drinking alcohol, but I've heard that works. Alcohol dries faster, but I had the water here already. So all I'm doing is kind of blending this in. It works great because it's on watercolor paper, just to kind of get my basic idea in. Now I'm just pulling out some of these pans I think I'm going to use, but I actually end up using some different ones instead. But this is going to be what I call a watercolor underpainting. And I'm using what's called local color, even though I warm it up a bit. Local color just means I'm going to be painting the color that's in the scene. I'm not going to be doing a complementary underpainting. So I don't know what I held. Oh yeah, I'm adding like some blues and some other colors. But what's nice is I'm going to hold up the thing as I paint so you can see the colors. And look at that gorgeous blue. Now that's what I'm going to use to get in. Look at that. That's the advantage of watercolor. Look at the luminescence. It really is great for sky work. You keep that soft, luminous cloud-like feel. I mean, it makes excellent clouds. Now in my reference photo, I could see that typically, and this is typically so, the darker values on the clouds are going to be on their underside. You know, they might be holding some rain, but also, of course, because the sun is usually on top of them or behind them, so they're usually a little bit darker underneath. So, just watch for a while. I'm actually putting some watercolor, that same pretty color, on top of the pastel that I put on there, kind of to reinforce it. But you can see, even just using one little NuPastel and some watercolor, you're starting to get a little idea of the painting. Now I'm using some of this pretty pink to get some of those pink tones in the sky. But I'm going to just play the music now and let you watch. If you haven't done this before, don't get frustrated if your watercolor painting feels uncomfortable at first. If you haven't done it, it sure did for me. I had a hard time going from pastel to watercolor. I had really not done any watercolor other than when you're like in grade school. So it took me a while to realize how much water to add, you know, and all of that. But don't quit if you get frustrated. Just keep trying, keep watching, because it really is a great way to save money. That's one of the things that I really love about using the watercolor paper with the clear gesso that you'll see in a minute, is it helps me to save money because pastel papers get expensive. And I also like the loose impressionistic feel that you get when you do this. So I'm getting some nice, it has really nice purple selections in this Arteza watercolor little palette that it has here. So I'm again reinforcing, but this is going to serve, I have a lot of people on my channel that ask, why an underpainting? I like, first of all, I like covering up all that big white space or whatever color your paper is you're working with. And it also lends towards impressionism. Also too, you want your underpainting to be free and fresh. That's like the title of this video. It'll keep your painting feeling fresh, energetic, and more impressionistic if you just paint loosely in this nice, drippy, pretty watercolor painting underneath. But an underpainting just kind of serves as a roadmap and a nice base for your painting. Now I'm using the clear gesso. Why clear liquid gesso? Well, if you were to put pastel right on top of that watercolor painting, it would fall right off or get muddy real quickly. Soft pastels need some grit to hold on to. This clear gesso, it's a pretty inexpensive product. It holds, it has a texture to it, a little sand in it. So when it dries, it'll make your surface and your paper a little bit gritty. And you've basically just made your own pastel surface with a pretty inexpensive product, being watercolor paper and clear liquid gesso. And I've come to where I really like this technique. and it really does help beginners. A lot of times you don't have the money to go out and buy all these expensive art materials. Did I say I was going to quit talking? Well, I didn't. And these are my pastels. I also like in my videos to focus on a limited palette because I know a lot of you guys don't have a lot of pastels to work with yet, but I have some darks, I have some grass colors, I have those warm colors up top that are going to be my roots and my dirt on the ground, and I have those pretty blues and purples that are going to be the clouds, and I had some lighter values for the sky and some pinks and oranges and yellows that are going to be that sun glowing in the distance. Now with clouds, I do have another video where I talk about clouds, but and now obviously you can see here I'm applying the pastel on top of the dried clear gesso, and it's working great. I'll talk about the clouds in a minute. I want to say here though, part of the point of this video was about keeping it fresh, and one thing that helps you to keep it fresh with this technique is putting the clear liquid gesso on a piece of watercolor paper. It works great, but it doesn't give you quite the layering ability as some of the other pastel papers. So I have found that it forces me to be a little more purposeful with my painting and stop rather than overworking it. I stop earlier, and a lot of times it allows me to keep a fresher look because I know, you know what, I don't want to overwork this, so let's just keep this impressionistic and loose and free. And it really helps me to keep my painting more fresh when I know I don't have a lot of layering ability. So that's one reason, another reason that I really do like this technique. Okay, back to clouds. When painting clouds, or let me rephrase that. When painting clouds with a sunset or a sunrise where you've got that nice warm glow in a distance, the clouds surrounding the sun, you're going to get all of your warmer tones. The clouds further away from the sun are going to be cooler in color temperature, more blue, more purple. And so my sun source is sort of in the middle there, to the middle right, and right there above the horizon. So I'm keeping that in mind as I'm adding my colors. I don't want to add a lot of real warm colors up high because that's just not how it works in nature. And I'm trying to keep a little bit of that lightness. That's the wonderful thing about the watercolor paper, is that you've got that nice white paper underneath, and I don't want all the white showing, but I also don't want to lose that. That's my lightest value there, so I'm keeping a really lighter soft pastel when I go into those brightest areas of the clouds. Now a little bit of that pinkish glow is in that area of the clouds, but it's also kind of peeking through like that little hole I added up there. So we're going to get a little bit of those yellows, peachy tones, and pink tones all kind of popping around underneath those clouds, bouncing around with the pretty warm light. Now I'm also using a lighter pastel to get some of those light. Have you ever heard of the silver lining in clouds? It's really just light shining behind the cloud that creates that. So that lighter pastel is what's going to allow me to do that. So okay, now watch while I paint a little while, enjoy this, and you know me, I'll be back soon to add some more commentary. All right, here I am again. I wanted to point out how, do you see I used that lighter blue? I had a little darker value for those distant trees, but just adding that little bit of lighter value blue on top of it pushed them back further. Now I wanted to point out here, notice this kind of a rich reddish burgundy color that I'm adding. Now some people, well, often I get people asking me, how do you push color and get creative with color? Well, if you put down a color, just green right here, grass color, it's gonna be very boring. The red is really like the color of the earth, and it's also a complementary color to greens. So it's going to create a lot of vibrancy and interest in your artwork. Now I'm using a little bit of a lighter value orange further back, and I realized that was a little too warm in the background. That you see that you want to have cooler colors in the background. So see how I lightened up that and lighter values. I lightened up that orange in the background. And that is a warmer color in the background, but the reason that works is because the sun is right over it. You can see that sunset or sunrise right over that field. So, you know, that really does allow you to have a little bit more warmth back there. So I'm using a little lighter value, just a touch of green back there to indicate grasses. And notice as I change my greens, and I may not do all greens here, but when you see me pick up a green, notice that the darker, more vibrant greens are usually in the foreground, darker values, and paler, more neutral greens are usually in the background. Again, that distant field is a little contrary to that rule just because it has so much sunshine shining over it. Now I'm adding some more greens for interest, kind of more shadowy greens. If you just use one color for your dark, your painting is going to be a little flat. When you add different colors of the same value, as long as you don't get too muddy with it, your painting is going to feel much more alive and fresh with color. Now I'm just giving little hints of grasses growing up. Typically your grasses in the distance are going to be horizontal bands, and your grasses in the foreground are going to be vertical. Now here I'm adding a little bit of highlight to those trees. Obviously the sun in the background has a little bit of light that's hitting them, a little bit of highlight to these trees, but these trees are very dark anyway, so I'm not going too light of a value for the highlights or where the sun's shining on them. If I did, it would look unnatural. Adding, I think, what is this? Some more greens in there, darker because that's in the shadow. And you see how this is starting to come to life now. Oh, I know what I'm doing there. I was lowering, that tree line had gotten too high. When I run my hand across there earlier, I was showing I had the under part of those trees all too much in a straight line. So I brought these trees on the right down further to create levels of trees. You've got the one on the right is the lowest in the horizon, the one on the left, the tree group in the left is middle, and the ones far away are higher in the horizon. And so, you know, these are just little things that you learn how nature works perspectively. See how I added the little highlight on those trees, and it gave them, they're not as flat anymore because I put some lighter value green highlights on those trees. Purples, I love purples. So a little bit of purple. You want to punch up your painting when you start, if you want to punch up your painting as you're kind of winding down. It's purples in dedicated places can make a nice touch. You'll see at the end here too, I also add some reds. You don't want to overdo it with your little spicy colors, but sometimes that helps. I'm wrapping it up at this phase, and I want to stress again that keeping it fresh was the focus of this video. Often when we overwork our painting or overlayer our pastels, we create dead colors, more muddy colors. And when you keep it fresh and you work on a surface like this homemade surface, where you know you're not going to get as much layering, often you have more fun and you get creative with color, and you hopefully won't overwork it. That's what's going to keep your colors bright and fresh. This was more of the correct lighting in my studio. I sit near a window where I work, and often the lighting changes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you'll try these techniques, and I so enjoy all of your comments. Keep them coming. Subscribe if you haven't already, and always happy painting.